Look at this. Lieutenant Derek Holloway sneered as he ripped the federal access badge from the black woman's jacket and deliberately dropped it onto the wet asphalt before grinding it beneath the heel of his polished boot. A black woman carrying a government badge like she actually belongs inside a federal facility. Your little fantasy ends today. He grabbed Naomi Carter's wrists, slammed them behind her back, and snapped the handcuffs shut with a loud metallic click. Then he deliberately jerked the chain between the cuffs upward, forcing her to stumble a step forward. "Careful," Derek mocked with a cold smile. "You're not walking into some government office anymore. You're walking into a jail cell." Several officers laughed. Derek leaned closer so every nearby phone could capture his words. "You kept pretending you were important. Turns out you're just another suspect who thought a badge could hide the truth." He gave the cuffs another sharp yank, making the steel bite into Naomi's wrists. "There," he announced loudly, turning toward the growing crowd of reporters. "Now everyone can see what happens when someone thinks they're above the law." Camera flashes exploded. Employees froze. Live streams began within seconds. Rumors spread faster than facts. Naomi never protested. She never begged. She simply lifted her eyes toward the entrance as the deep roar of approaching engines rolled across the parking lot. One black SUV appeared, then another, then 6 more. The crowd fell silent as dozens of FBI agents stepped out in perfect formation. Their leader looked directly at Naomi and slowly raised his hand in a formal salute. "Before we reveal why an entire FBI team saluted the woman everyone believed was a criminal, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your city. If you believe no one should be judged before the truth is known, stay with us until the very end. Share your thoughts below and consider subscribing for more unforgettable stories." 48 hours earlier, the parking lot outside Baltimore's Federal Data Operations Center had been nothing more than another quiet government facility where employees arrived before sunrise, coffee cups in hand, unaware that the biggest federal corruption case in Maryland's recent history was entering its final hour. Dr. Naomi Carter parked her 10-year-old silver Honda Accord in the farthest corner of the employee lot, just as she always did. She preferred walking the extra distance. It gave her a few quiet minutes before another day spent solving problems that most people would never know existed. At 41, Naomi had earned a reputation among the handful of people allowed to know her work. Calm under pressure, brilliant with digital evidence, impossible to intimidate. Yet outside that small circle, she looked like an ordinary federal technology consultant. She carried no expensive handbag. She wore no designer clothes. A navy blazer, black slacks, and comfortable shoes were enough. Inside her leather satchel rested an encrypted laptop containing evidence that could dismantle an organization responsible for stealing millions of taxpayer dollars through fraudulent cybersecurity contracts. Only 6 people in the country knew exactly what was inside. Naomi intended to keep it that way. As she entered the building, security guard Samuel Jenkins smiled from behind the front desk. "Morning, Dr. Carter." "Morning, Sam. You look like you haven't slept." Naomi smiled politely. "I'll sleep after Friday." Samuel chuckled. "That's what you said yesterday." She signed the visitor log despite having clearance higher than almost everyone in the building. Following procedures had become second nature. Upstairs, inside a secured conference room protected by multiple biometric checkpoints, 3 people were already waiting. Special Agent Melissa Grant stood beside a digital display filled with timelines and financial charts. Lisa Chen, the FBI's senior cyber analyst, was typing rapidly across 3 monitors. The final person, dressed in a dark suit without any identifying badge, closed the conference room door behind Naomi. "Good," he said quietly. "Everyone's here." He placed a sealed folder on the table. "The arrests are scheduled for tomorrow afternoon." Melissa nodded. "Every financial transfer has been traced." Lisa added, "We recovered 98% of the deleted server logs overnight." Naomi opened her laptop. "And the remaining 2%? Lisa hesitated. "They were erased from inside the police evidence network." The room fell silent. Naomi slowly looked up. "Someone with local law enforcement access." Melissa folded her arms. "We believe so." Naomi zoomed into a series of encrypted timestamps. "No." Everyone looked toward her. This wasn't random deletion. She highlighted several missing entries. Whoever did this knew exactly which files connected the contractors to the payment approvals. The unnamed official leaned forward. "So we're dealing with someone on the inside." Naomi answered without emotion. "We're dealing with someone who's been protecting them from the beginning." The weight of those words settled heavily across the room. If she was right, The investigation had become far more dangerous than anyone expected. Meanwhile, across the city, Lieutenant Derek Holloway was holding his own morning briefing inside Baltimore Police Headquarters. He stood confidently before a room filled with detectives. "We've received intelligence. One thing with someone inside the Federal Data Operations Center is preparing to destroy critical evidence." One detective raised a hand. "From whom?" Derek tapped a folder but kept it closed. "Confidential source." In truth, the anonymous tip had arrived less than an hour earlier through an encrypted email. It contained only one name, Naomi Carter. No supporting evidence, no explanation, just her name. Most experienced investigators would have treated the message with skepticism. Derek saw something else, an opportunity. For years, he had dreamed of leading the investigation that would make national headlines. If he arrested the suspect before federal agents acted, every television station in America would know his name. He smiled to himself. We move fast. Back inside the federal facility, Naomi continued comparing financial records when her encrypted phone vibrated once. One short message appeared. Protocol Gray. Trust no local channels. Her expression changed instantly. Melissa noticed. What happened? Naomi quietly turned the phone around. Melissa read the message twice. Who sent this? No signature. Lisa looked uneasy. Can someone fake that system? Naomi slowly shook her head. Not unless they already have access to internal federal communications. Another silence filled the room. The investigation wasn't leaking anymore. It had been infiltrated. Naomi immediately disconnected her laptop from the building network. We proceed exactly as planned. Melissa frowned. Shouldn't we notify Baltimore police? Naomi looked directly at her. Not until we know who we're notifying. Outside, dark clouds gathered over the city. Rain began tapping softly against the conference room windows. None of them noticed. Hours later, Naomi left the building carrying the encrypted laptop locked inside her satchel. She walked toward her car, unaware that an unmarked sedan parked across the street had photographed her every movement throughout the afternoon. Inside the sedan, Officer Kevin Morris lowered his camera. That's her. The driver looked toward police headquarters. You think the lieutenant's right? Kevin shrugged. He said she's our suspect. The driver started the engine. Neither man realized they were following the very person who had been risking her life for nearly 2 years to expose the conspiracy they were unknowingly helping protect. Naomi glanced briefly into her rearview mirror. One gray sedan. Nothing unusual. She continued driving home. But for the first time since the investigation had begun, a feeling she almost never experienced settled quietly in her mind. Someone wasn't simply watching the evidence anymore. Someone was watching her. The gray sedan stayed exactly 4 car lengths behind Naomi Carter all the way across downtown Baltimore. She noticed it at the 3rd traffic light. By the 6th, she was certain. Most people being followed would speed up or take unpredictable turns. Naomi did neither. She obeyed every speed limit, signaled every lane change, and drove as though she had never seen the vehicle at all. Inside the sedan, Officer Kevin Morris lowered his binoculars. She's calm. The driver smirked. Guilty people usually are until the cuffs come out. Kevin wasn't completely convinced. There hasn't been a single suspicious move. The driver shrugged. The lieutenant says she's dirty. That was enough for him. Across town, Lieutenant Derek Holloway stood inside the department's intelligence room, watching Naomi's GPS location update every few seconds on a digital map. Don't lose her, he ordered. We won't. Derek ended the call and turned towards Sergeant Linda Harper. I've already contacted Channel 8 News. Linda frowned. The media? He smiled. If this arrest is as big as I think it is, the public deserves to see it. Or maybe they deserve to see evidence first. His smile disappeared. I didn't ask for your opinion. Linda held his gaze for several seconds before quietly leaving the office. For the first time in years, she questioned whether ambition had finally outweighed Derek's judgment. Naomi arrived at a modest brick townhouse just after sunset. No security gate, no luxury cars. No signs that one of the nation's leading digital forensic specialists lived there. Her mother, Gloria Carter, was already setting dinner on the table. You worked late again. Naomi kissed her mother's cheek. It'll be over soon. You've been saying that for months. Naomi smiled gently. I mean it this time. Gloria studied her daughter's tired face. When this project ends, I'll finally take that vacation you keep planning for me. Her mother laughed. I'll believe it when I see your suitcase. For a few precious minutes, the investigation disappeared. They talked about neighbors, about Marcus's college classes, about ordinary things, the kind of conversation Naomi had spent nearly 2 years protecting. Then her encrypted phone vibrated again. One message, The leak has spread. Do not trust local law enforcement. Her heartbeat slowed instead of quickening. That was how she handled danger. The calmer she became, the more serious the situation usually was. She quietly excused herself and stepped onto the back porch. Melissa Grant answered on the second ring. You saw it? I did. We've confirmed someone accessed classified communication logs. How high? Melissa hesitated. High enough that someone knows your name. Naomi looked into the dark backyard. So I'm compromised. We're trying to move the arrest timetable forward. No. Melissa sounded surprised. What? If we move too early, whoever's inside disappears. They're already hunting you. I know. A long silence followed. Finally, Melissa asked softly, Are you scared? Naomi looked toward the stars, barely visible through heavy clouds. I'm worried. About yourself? No. She closed her eyes. About everyone who doesn't realize they're standing in the middle of this. The following morning, Baltimore awoke to an anonymous headline published on several local news websites. Federal cyber sabotage suspect identified. No official statement. No charges. No verified evidence. Only unnamed police sources. The accompanying photograph showed Naomi leaving the federal building the previous afternoon. Within minutes, television stations repeated the story. Radio hosts speculated. Social media exploded. She doesn't look innocent. I heard millions were stolen. They should lock her up. None of them knew the truth. By 9 o'clock, reporters had already gathered outside the Federal Data Operations Center. Inside, employees whispered every time Naomi walked past. Some avoided eye contact. Others stared openly. Angela Morris, the front desk receptionist, quietly approached Naomi. I'm sorry. Naomi looked up. For what? They're saying terrible things. Naomi smiled softly. They don't know me. Angela lowered her voice. I do. Those two words meant more than either woman realized. At police headquarters, Derek watched the television coverage with satisfaction. Exactly as he had hoped. Public opinion had already begun convicting Naomi long before any courtroom ever could. Officer Kevin Morris entered. We've confirmed she'll leave the building around 4 this afternoon. Derek nodded. Good. Should we coordinate with the FBI? Derek laughed. They can read about it on the evening news. Kevin hesitated. Lieutenant. What? We still don't have physical evidence. Derek slowly stood. You know what we do have? Kevin remained silent. A suspect. But, and tomorrow morning every major network will remember the officer who caught her. Kevin said nothing more. As he walked away, uncertainty weighed heavier than ever. Something about the entire operation felt rushed. Manufactured. Wrong. Back at the federal building, Naomi sat alone inside the digital evidence lab. Multiple encrypted drives lay across her desk. She stared at one particular financial record. One payment. One signature. One authorization code. Everything pointed toward Thomas Ellison's company. Except one timestamp had changed. Barely 3 seconds. 3 seconds that shouldn't exist. Naomi enlarged the metadata, then enlarged it again. Her breathing stopped. Someone hadn't simply altered financial records. Someone had entered the Federal Evidence Archive itself. The conspiracy was larger than stolen contracts. Someone inside government systems had been rewriting reality. She immediately disconnected every external device. Footsteps approached. Lisa Chen entered. You found something. Naomi slowly turned the monitor. Lisa's face drained of color. That's impossible. No. Naomi whispered. It's worse. Lisa looked at her. How much worse? Naomi closed the encrypted file. Worse enough that if they know I've seen this. She never finished the sentence. Outside the laboratory window, 2 television helicopters circled above the federal complex. Inside the parking lot below, several police cruisers quietly took their positions long before anyone officially requested them. The trap had already been set. Only Naomi didn't yet know exactly who would spring it. Far across the lot, Lieutenant Derek Holloway stepped out of his unmarked SUV, adjusted his tie, and watched the entrance with the confidence of a man already rehearsing tomorrow's interviews. He smiled to himself. In less than an hour, the entire country would watch him arrest the woman he believed had built the perfect crime. The moment Dr. Naomi Carter stepped through the glass doors of the Federal Data Operations Center, the flashing blue lights waiting across the parking lot reflected off the building's windows like a warning she could no longer ignore. Lieutenant Derek Holloway checked his watch. 4 o'clock. Right on schedule. He stepped forward before Naomi had taken more than 3 steps. Dr. Naomi Carter? She stopped calmly. Yes. Place your bag on the ground. Employees froze where they stood. Several reporters immediately rushed toward the yellow barricades that officers had quietly erected minutes earlier. Naomi looked around once. Police cruisers, uniformed officers, television cameras. Someone had planned every detail. Without saying a word, she slowly placed her leather satchel on the pavement. Discretion, smart choice. Officer Kevin Morris carefully picked up the satchel while another officer began searching Naomi's coat. Her encrypted phone, her identification, her access cards. Everything disappeared into evidence bags. Employees whispered among themselves. I knew the rumors were true. She worked here every day. How could nobody notice? Angela Morris covered her mouth in disbelief. No. Samuel Jenkins stood silently near the security gate, watching every movement. Something about the arrest felt rehearsed rather than investigated. Derek held up Naomi's encrypted laptop. So this is where you kept everything, Naomi answered quietly. Be careful with that computer. He laughed. Oh, don't worry. He handed it to an evidence technician. We'll enjoy opening every file. Naomi met his eyes. You won't. His smile widened. We'll see. Inside police headquarters an hour later, Naomi sat alone inside a gray interview room. One steel table, 2 chairs, one security camera blinking steadily from the ceiling. Her handcuffs had finally been removed, leaving deep red marks around both wrists. She gently rubbed them without showing anger. The door opened. Derek entered carrying a thick folder. He deliberately tossed it onto the table. It didn't have to happen this way. Naomi remained silent. You could still help yourself. She folded her hands together. I have nothing to confess. He opened the folder dramatically. Federal systems breached. He flipped another page. Millions of dollars missing. Another page. Encrypted communications. Then he leaned forward. Everything points to you. Naomi looked directly at him. No. His eyebrows lifted. No? Everything points to someone who wanted it to look like me. For just a second, Derek hesitated. Only a second. Then his confidence returned. That's creative. It's the truth. He pushed a written confession across the table. Sign it. Naomi didn't even glance down. No. You haven't read it. I don't need to. Derek's patience began slipping. You're not walking out of here tonight. Naomi's voice remained remarkably calm. I know. He stared at her. You know? She nodded. I also know this interview is being recorded. He looked instinctively toward the camera. Naomi continued, and I know every decision you make inside this room will matter later. The words unsettled him far more than he wanted to admit. Across town, Special Agent Melissa Grant stormed into a secured FBI operations center. They arrested her. Every conversation stopped. Lisa Chen spun around from her workstation. What? Melissa threw a tablet onto the conference table. Live television showed Naomi being escorted into police headquarters. They moved without notifying us. Special Agent Ethan Brooks immediately stood. Who authorized local police involvement? No one. Lisa's fingers flew across her keyboard. They bypassed every federal notification protocol. Ethan's jaw tightened. They've compromised the operation. Melissa looked toward him. What are your orders? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at Naomi's image on the monitor. They think they arrested a suspect. His expression hardened. They have no idea who they've just put in handcuffs. Back inside the interview room, Derek tried a different approach. You've built an impressive career. Silence. It'd be a shame if history remembered you as a traitor. Naomi finally spoke. History remembers facts. He smiled coldly. History remembers headlines. He slid several printed news articles across the table. Every headline declared her guilty. Every photograph showed her surrounded by police. He waited for panic, for anger, for tears. Instead, Naomi quietly looked through each page before setting them aside. Anything else? Derek frowned. That's it? What? You're not even upset. She answered honestly. I'm disappointed. In yourself? In how easily people accept conclusions before asking questions. For the first time, Derek found himself running out of prepared lines. Nothing affected her. Every insult, every accusation, every attempt to break her confidence failed. Meanwhile, Officer Daniel Price quietly entered the digital evidence room downstairs. He had been assigned to catalog Naomi's confiscated belongings. Most officers would simply label the evidence and leave. Daniel noticed something strange. The chain of custody document had already been completed. Time-stamped. Signed. Nearly 20 minutes. Before Naomi had actually arrived. He stared at the form again. That wasn't possible. Unless the paperwork had been prepared before the arrest even happened. His pulse quickened. He opened another file, then another. Every document looked perfectly normal. until he compared the metadata. 3 separate timestamps had been edited. Someone had altered official police records. Daniel slowly leaned back. This wasn't a rushed investigation. It was a planned narrative. Before he could think further, footsteps echoed outside. He quickly copied the digital logs onto a secure flash drive hidden inside his notebook. The office door opened. Lieutenant Derek Holloway stepped inside. "You finished?" Daniel forced himself to remain calm. "Almost." Derek glanced briefly toward the evidence computer. "Good." As Derek walked away, Daniel slipped the flash drive into his jacket pocket. For the first time in his career, he wasn't worried about solving a case. He was worried about surviving one. Late that evening, Naomi remained alone inside her holding cell. The building had grown quiet. Most officers had gone home. Rain tapped softly against the narrow window high above the concrete wall. She finally closed her eyes, not to rest, to think. Every move Derek had made, every missing timestamp, every altered record, every anonymous leak, the pieces were beginning to fit together. The conspiracy wasn't trying merely to destroy evidence. It was trying to destroy the credibility of the one person capable of exposing all of it. Outside the detention area, Daniel Price stood in the hallway, looking down at the flash drive hidden inside his pocket. He knew what it contained. Proof that someone inside the department had manipulated official records. If he stayed silent, an innocent woman might disappear beneath the weight of manufactured evidence. If he spoke, he could lose his badge, or much worse. He took a slow breath, pulled out his phone, and searched for one contact he had been told never to use unless absolutely necessary. Federal Bureau of Investigation. His thumb hovered over the call button. Then, he pressed it. The call lasted only 12 seconds. Officer Daniel Price never spoke his name. He simply said, "Your technical advisor has been set up. The evidence inside Baltimore Police Headquarters has been altered. Check the chain of custody records before they're destroyed." Then he hung up. Inside the FBI Operations Center, the secure hotline flashed red. Lisa Chen answered first. Federal Operations. A computerized system had already scrambled the caller's identity. Only the message remained. Lisa replayed it twice before turning toward Special Agent Ethan Brooks. "You need to hear this." The room fell silent. After the recording ended, Ethan looked at Melissa Grant. "Can we verify any of it?" Melissa was already opening the department's evidence database through a federal oversight portal. "Give me 30 seconds. Rows of digital records filled the screen. Evidence submissions, officer signatures, transfer logs. Then Melissa stopped typing. Her expression changed instantly. "He's right." Ethan stepped closer. "What did you find?" She enlarged one timestamp. "This evidence inventory was certified at 3:41 p.m. Lisa frowned. But Naomi wasn't processed until after 4. Melissa nodded slowly. The paperwork existed before the arrest. Nobody spoke. Inside the FBI, that single discovery transformed a questionable arrest into a possible criminal conspiracy. Ethan immediately picked up a secure phone. "Prepare the emergency integrity team." Melissa looked at him. "We're moving tonight?" "Not yet." He lowered the receiver. "If someone inside Baltimore PD is fabricating evidence, they'll panic the moment they realize we're looking. We let them keep talking." Lisa understood immediately. "We watch them expose themselves." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Derek Holloway stood before nearly 20 reporters gathered inside the police headquarters media room. Television cameras lit the podium. Microphones crowded together beneath the department's seal. Derek adjusted his tie before smiling confidently. This afternoon, officers from the Baltimore Police Department successfully apprehended the primary suspect connected to an ongoing cybercrime investigation involving federal infrastructure. A reporter immediately raised her hand. "Lieutenant Holloway, has the FBI confirmed your arrest? The investigation is ongoing." "So, no? We're cooperating with all appropriate agencies." Another reporter stood. "Has Dr. Naomi Carter been formally charged?" "The evidence speaks for itself." "What evidence?" Derek's smile stiffened. "We cannot discuss active investigative material." Emily Ross lowered her notebook. Unlike many journalists in the room, she wasn't interested in dramatic headlines. She wanted inconsistencies. And she had already found one. "You've described Dr. Carter as dangerous," Emily said. "Correct. Then why did officers allow television crews to arrive before the arrest began?" The room suddenly grew quiet. Derek blinked. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm asking why multiple news stations were already positioned in your parking lot before your officers even approached her." Several reporters exchanged quick glances. No one had considered that question. Derek recovered quickly. "The media monitors police activity. Emily didn't write down his answer, because it wasn't an answer. Downstairs, Naomi remained inside her holding cell. Hours had passed. No attorney. No federal representative. No formal interview since Derek left. The silence itself had become a strategy. She leaned against the concrete wall, mentally replaying every piece of evidence she had uncovered before her arrest. 3 altered timestamps, 1 missing authorization code, a deleted audit trail. Then something else surfaced in her memory. A maintenance request, filed 6 weeks earlier. Server room C, unauthorized access after midnight. At the time, it had seemed insignificant. Now, it connected everything. Someone had entered the secure server long before the financial records were manipulated. Naomi quietly smiled to herself. Not because she was comfortable, because she finally understood where the conspiracy had truly begun. At the same moment, Officer Kevin Morris carried Naomi's encrypted laptop into the digital evidence laboratory. Harold Pierce was already waiting. Officially, Harold worked as an outside cybersecurity consultant. Unofficially, he had spent years quietly helping powerful people erase inconvenient data. Kevin placed the laptop on the table. Lieutenant wants everything copied. Harold examined the device. This isn't an ordinary government computer. Can you get in? Harold confidently connected specialized hardware. 5 minutes later, the screen remained black. He tried another tool. Nothing. Another. Still nothing. Sweat slowly formed across his forehead. This doesn't make sense. Kevin folded his arms. I thought you said no computer was impossible. Harold swallowed. This one is. He zoomed in on the encryption header. Then his face turned pale. No. What? This isn't standard federal encryption. Kevin stepped closer. What does that mean? Harold whispered almost to himself. This level of protection isn't issued to consultants. He stared at Naomi's locked laptop as if seeing it for the first time. Who exactly have you arrested? Across town, Samuel Jenkins sat alone inside the Federal Data Operations Center security office. His shift had officially ended an hour earlier, yet he hadn't gone home. Instead, he watched archived surveillance footage 1 camera at a time. Parking lot, lobby, loading dock, server, hallway. Then, camera du jubilas. Samuel paused the recording. A maintenance contractor entered server room C at 12:18 a.m., but according to official maintenance logs, no work had ever been scheduled that night. Samuel rewound the footage, zoomed in. The contractor's face remained hidden beneath a cap. However, the access badge clipped to the man's belt was clearly visible. Samuel enlarged the frame again. The badge belonged to Baltimore Police Technical Support. His breathing slowed. Police weren't simply involved after the crime. Someone from the department had physically entered the federal building weeks before Naomi's arrest. Without wasting another second, Samuel copied the footage onto an encrypted drive. He slipped it into his jacket. Just as he stood to leave, every monitor inside the security office suddenly went black. On est. Then a single message appeared across every screen. Remote connection established. Samuel froze. Someone was deleting the surveillance archive. He immediately disconnected the main server from the network. The screens flickered, then shut down completely. He had saved only 1 camera. Camera de bolus. Everything else was gone. Back inside police headquarters, Daniel Price quietly opened the flash drive hidden beneath his desk. He compared the department's official records against the backup logs he had copied earlier. The differences were undeniable. Evidence timestamps had been rewritten. Officer signatures duplicated. Transfer approvals fabricated. This wasn't one dishonest detective. It required multiple people. Daniel leaned back, rubbing his temples. The deeper he looked, the larger the conspiracy became. A sudden knock interrupted his thoughts. Sergeant Linda Harper stepped inside. You still here? Daniel quickly minimized the files. Just finishing paperwork. Linda studied him carefully. You look nervous. He forced a smile. Long day. She nodded toward the hallway. Derek wants every report finalized before sunrise. As she turned to leave, she quietly added, Be careful who you trust around here. Daniel looked up. Had she guessed? Or did she know far more than she was willing to say? Before he could ask, she disappeared down the corridor. Daniel looked once more at the evidence on his screen, then at the locked office door. Outside, the storm over Baltimore grew stronger. Inside police headquarters, a far more dangerous storm was only beginning. By sunrise, 3 different investigations were unfolding across Baltimore. The public believed police had captured a dangerous cybercriminal. Lieutenant Derek Holloway believed he was only hours away from becoming the face of a nationally celebrated investigation. Only the FBI knew the truth was beginning to move in an entirely different direction. Inside the Bureau's Secure Operations Center, Special Agent Ethan Brooks stood before a wall-sized digital display filled with evidence collected over the previous 18 months. Red lines connected contractors, financial accounts, police officials, city administrators, and now, new evidence had begun connecting Baltimore Police Headquarters itself. Melissa Grant entered carrying 2 encrypted drives. Samuel Jenkins made contact. Ethan looked up immediately. Is he safe? So far. She inserted the first drive into an isolated workstation. The security archive survived. Lisa Chen quickly opened the footage. The room watched in complete silence. At precisely 12:18 a.m., an individual wearing a maintenance uniform entered server room C. His face remained hidden beneath a cap, but when he reached for the secured door, his identification badge became perfectly visible. Lisa froze the image. She enlarged it, then enlarged it again. Baltimore Police Technical Support. Employee number TS4179. Ethan's expression hardened. So Naomi was right. Melissa folded her arms. They were inside the federal facility weeks before the arrest. Lisa continued examining the footage. Wait. She enhanced another frame. The unknown man wasn't carrying tools. He was carrying a portable server cloning device. He wasn't repairing anything, she whispered. He was copying data. Every person in the room understood the implication. The conspiracy had never depended on hacking from outside. Someone had walked directly into the building under official credentials. Across town, Harold Pierce had barely slept. Naomi's encrypted laptop still sat unopened on the laboratory table. He had tried everything available to him. Password extraction, hardware cloning, memory analysis. Nothing worked. His frustration turned into concern when he finally recognized the security architecture protecting the drive. He searched a classified technical database available only to certified federal contractors. One result appeared: restricted federal counterintelligence configuration. Harold stared at the monitor. His pulse quickened. Only a handful of government personnel ever received computers configured like this, certainly not outside consultants. He immediately called Lieutenant Derek Holloway. You need to come here. Derek answered impatiently. I'm busy. No? Harold lowered his voice. You need to see this yourself. 20 minutes later, Derek entered the laboratory. What couldn't wait? Harold turned the monitor toward him. This computer. What about it? It doesn't belong to who you think it belongs to. Derek laughed. It's hers. Yes, but not in the way you understand. Harold pointed at the security certificate. This encryption level is issued only through federal counterintelligence channels. Derek's smile faded slightly. So whoever owns this machine has access far beyond ordinary government contracts. He looked directly at Derek. I think you should contact the FBI before opening another evidence bag. For a brief second, uncertainty crossed Derek's face. Then pride won. We've already arrested her. Harold remained silent. Derek continued. If the FBI wants something, they can ask. He turned and walked out. Harold watched the door close. For the first time, he began wondering whether the greatest danger inside the building wasn't Naomi Carter, but Derek Holloway himself. Meanwhile, Officer Daniel Price sat alone in his patrol car outside headquarters. The flash drive hidden inside his jacket now felt heavier than his service weapon. He replayed the copied records again. Every alteration pointed toward one conclusion. Someone had manufactured probable cause before Naomi had even left work. His phone vibrated. Unknown number. Daniel hesitated before answering. Officer Price. A calm voice replied. This is Special Agent Melissa Grant. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. You called us last night. You did the right thing. He looked around instinctively. Are you tracking me? No. We're protecting a witness. Daniel swallowed hard. You already know who I am. We knew within minutes. Silence filled the line. Finally, Daniel spoke. The records are fake. We know. There are more. We know that too. Daniel closed his eyes. I don't know who I can trust. Melissa answered without hesitation. For now. Trust the evidence. Before disconnecting, she added one final sentence. And whatever happens today, do not confront Lieutenant Holloway. The call ended. Daniel stared through the windshield. That warning alone told him the Bureau was preparing something much bigger. Inside her holding cell, Naomi had been awake for nearly 24 hours. She hadn't asked for a lawyer. She hadn't requested a phone call. The officers guarding her found that strange. Most suspects demanded help. Naomi simply waited. She knew something the others didn't. If the Bureau had not intervened yet, they were still collecting evidence. Every extra hour strengthened the case. The cell door opened. Sergeant Linda Harper stepped inside carrying breakfast. "I figured you should eat." Naomi accepted the tray. "Thank you." Linda remained standing. "I've been doing this job 23 years. Naomi looked up. "I've never seen anyone this calm after an arrest." Naomi smiled faintly. "Panic doesn't change facts." Linda hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "You can. Did you do what they're accusing you of?" Naomi held her gaze. "No." Linda searched her face for several seconds. She found no fear, no desperation, only quiet certainty. As she walked toward the door, she paused. "My father used to tell me something." Naomi waited. Truth doesn't need a louder voice. It only needs enough time. The door closed. For the first time since the arrest, someone inside the department had openly treated Naomi like a human being instead of a headline. Late that afternoon, Emily Ross received an anonymous envelope at the newsroom. No return address. Inside were only 3 printed pages. The first showed chain of custody records. The second displayed metadata from police evidence logs. The third contained a handwritten note. "Compare the timestamps." Emily immediately opened both files on her computer. Her eyes widened. The official police report claimed Naomi's laptop entered evidence at 4:27 p.m., yet the digital certification had been completed at 3:41 p.m., 46 minutes earlier. Impossible. She leaned back slowly. Either someone had invented time, or someone had invented the case. Emily reached for her phone and dialed her editor. "I need authorization to hold tonight's story." Her editor sounded confused. "Why?" "Because tomorrow." She looked once more at the documents spread across her desk. "Everything Baltimore thinks it knows is about to change." Far across the city, inside a secure federal garage, 8 black SUVs quietly started their engines. Special Agent Ethan Brooks stepped into the lead vehicle. He looked at the operation order in his hand one final time before closing the folder. The heading read, "Federal Operation. Restore Integrity." He spoke calmly into the radio. "All teams, it's time." Lieutenant Derek Holloway hadn't smiled this much in years. Standing outside the interrogation wing early the next morning, he watched television crews assembling across the street. Satellite trucks lined the curb. Reporters rehearsed their opening lines while photographers adjusted their lenses toward the entrance of Baltimore Police Headquarters. Exactly as he had planned. By noon, the country would watch him expose the woman he believed had orchestrated one of the largest cybercrimes in state history. He straightened his uniform and walked toward Naomi Carter's holding cell. The stale door slid open. Naomi stood quietly beside the narrow window, hands folded in front of her. "You slept surprisingly well," Derek said. "I've had more difficult nights." He laughed softly. "You won't say that after today." Naomi looked at him without blinking. "What happens today?" Derek placed a thick legal folder on the small metal table. "Today you sign." He opened the folder. Inside sat a prepared confession spanning nearly 20 pages. Every accusation had already been typed, every admission carefully worded. Only one space remained empty. The signature line. Derek slid a pen across the table. "Sign it, and I'll recommend cooperation." Naomi glanced briefly at the document before pushing it back untouched. "I won't sign something that isn't true." His smile disappeared. "You don't seem to understand your position." "I understand it perfectly. You've already been convicted in the court of public opinion." Naomi answered calmly. "Public opinion isn't a courtroom." Derek leaned closer until only inches separated them. "The FBI isn't coming. They already know." He frowned. "What did you say?" "I said." Naomi slowly met his eyes. "They already know." For just a moment, something cold settled in Derek's stomach. Then he dismissed it. Bluffing. She had to be bluffing. He grabbed the confession and slammed it back onto the table. "You've got one last chance." "No. You'll spend decades in prison." "If that's the price of telling the truth," she gently folded her hands again. "I'll pay it." Derek stared at her in disbelief. He had questioned hardened gang leaders, violent offenders, career criminals. Eventually, every one of them had shown fear. Naomi never did. That frightened him more than he cared to admit. Without another word, he stormed out of the room. Downstairs, Harold Pierce anxiously paced around the digital evidence laboratory. Naomi's laptop remained sealed inside an evidence container. He had received 3 separate calls that morning from people demanding progress. He had given them the same answer each time. "I can't access it." The laboratory door burst open. Thomas Ellison walked inside without announcing himself. Harold's eyes widened. "You shouldn't be here." Thomas closed the door. I don't have a choice anymore. The wealthy contractor's expensive suit couldn't hide the sweat gathering around his collar. The police are asking too many questions. Harold lowered his voice. You need to disappear. I can't. Thomas looked toward Naomi's laptop. What's on that computer? I don't know. Can you destroy it? Harold stared at him. Destroy federal evidence? If we don't. Thomas swallowed hard. We're finished. Harold didn't answer, because deep down, he knew Thomas was right. At the same time, Officer Daniel Price quietly copied the final collection of altered evidence logs onto a second encrypted drive. He wasn't taking chances anymore. One copy remained hidden inside his patrol vehicle. The other stayed inside his jacket. As he disconnected the workstation, Sergeant Linda Harper stepped into the office. You've been working this evidence file a lot. Daniel froze. I'm just making sure everything's complete. Linda closed the door behind her. Then she lowered her voice. I saw the timestamps. Daniel's heart pounded. You. I know. She looked directly into his eyes. They don't match. Neither officer spoke for several seconds. Finally, Daniel whispered, I think someone built this case before the arrest. Linda nodded once. So do I. You told anyone? No. Why not? She looked toward the hallway. Because I don't know who's involved. Daniel slowly removed one encrypted drive from his jacket. If something happens to me, Linda immediately pushed it back. No. You need this. No, Daniel. Her voice grew firmer. If they're watching you, they're watching everyone you talk to. He understood immediately. The fewer people connected, the safer the evidence remained. Across Baltimore, Emily Ross sat inside the Channel 8 newsroom reviewing every interview Derek Holloway had given during the previous 48 hours. She replayed one particular sentence. The evidence speaks for itself. She paused the video, then opened another clip recorded before Naomi's arrest. Derek had made the exact same statement. 7 hours before the evidence had officially been processed. Emily leaned back. Got you. She quickly highlighted the timestamps, then opened her email. Subject line, Urgent, possible fabrication of police evidence. Before pressing send, she hesitated. If she published too early, whoever was manipulating the investigation might destroy everything. She deleted the draft. Instead, she drove straight toward the federal courthouse. If this story was as large as she believed, it belonged in federal hands first. Back inside the holding area, Naomi quietly closed her eyes. Footsteps echoed beyond the corridor. Not hurried, measured, professional. She recognized the rhythm instantly. Federal agents. They always walked differently from local officers. Disciplined, purposeful. She almost smiled. Not yet. Too early. The footsteps passed without stopping. She opened her eyes again. The bureau was here. Just not for her. Not yet. Meanwhile, inside a secure conference room at FBI headquarters, Special Agent Ethan Brooks stood before nearly 30 agents dressed in tactical gear. A massive digital map of Baltimore Police Headquarters filled the wall behind him. We now have confirmation of fabricated evidence. He clicked the remote. Chain of custody records appeared. Then surveillance footage. Then financial transfers. Every screen connected back to one growing conspiracy. This operation is no longer about a wrongful arrest. He looked around the room. It is now an obstruction of a federal investigation. Melissa Grant stepped beside him. Rules of engagement? Ethan answered without hesitation. No unnecessary force. No leaks. No warnings. He paused. And no mistakes. Another slide appeared. A photograph of Lieutenant Derek Holloway. Primary objective? Melissa asked. Ethan's expression hardened. Secure every document before he destroys it. Lisa Chen interrupted from the back of the room. We've intercepted unusual network traffic. Every head turned. She enlarged the digital logs. Someone inside Baltimore Police Headquarters is remotely deleting evidence. How much? Approximately 12% of the archive. She looked up grimly, and increasing every minute. The room became absolutely silent. Ethan closed the operation folder. That's enough. He reached for his radio. Mobilize every team. Outside the secure garage, 8 black SUVs rolled toward the exit in perfect formation. Engines rumbled through the concrete structure. Agents checked body cameras, protective vests, evidence kits, federal warrants. Every vehicle carried the same destination, Baltimore Police Headquarters. Inside his office, unaware of what was racing toward him, Lieutenant Derek Holloway stood before a mirror adjusting the ribbon on his dress uniform. He smiled at his own reflection. In less than 1 hour, he believed he would become a national hero. He never noticed the first black SUV turning onto the street outside. The first black SUV rolled to a smooth stop outside Baltimore Police Headquarters. Then a second, A third. Within seconds, 8 identical federal vehicles lined both sides of the entrance. The television reporters who had gathered for Lieutenant Derek Holloway's press conference instinctively turned their cameras away from the podium. What is that? Are those federal vehicles? Keep rolling. Every cameraman pointed toward the convoy. Doors opened in perfect sequence. One after another, dozens of FBI agents stepped onto the pavement wearing dark tactical jackets marked with bright gold letters across their backs. FB. The chatter outside instantly disappeared. Inside headquarters, Officer Kevin Morris glanced through the front window. Lieutenant, Derek was adjusting the microphone before his scheduled statement. What? I think you should see this. Annoyed, Derek walked toward the entrance. The moment he looked outside, his confident smile faded. What are they doing here? Before anyone answered, Special Agent Ethan Brooks climbed the front steps, accompanied by Melissa Grant, Victor Hayes, Carlos Ramirez, and nearly 30 federal agents. No one hurried, no one shouted. Their calm professionalism made the moment even more unsettling. Ethan stopped directly in front of Derek. Lieutenant Holloway? Yes. I'm Special Agent Ethan Brooks. Derek forced a confident smile. I wasn't informed the Bureau would be joining today's press conference. You weren't. Ethan handed him a sealed envelope. You've been served. Derek looked down. The first page read, Federal Preservation Order. His heartbeat quickened. What is this? A federal order directing every member of this department to stop touching digital evidence immediately. Derek laughed nervously. You're overreacting. No. Ethan's voice remained steady. We're preventing obstruction. The reporters moved closer. Microphones stretched toward both men. Emily Ross recognized the expression on Ethan's face. This wasn't a public relations visit. This was an intervention. Inside the evidence laboratory, Harold Pierce heard the commotion downstairs. He hurried to the window, his face drained of color. V. Thomas Ellison looked up from the computer. What? They're here. Thomas rushed toward the glass. When he saw the convoy, panic replaced every ounce of confidence he had carried for months. They know. Harold turned toward Naomi's encrypted laptop. If they seize this, Thomas interrupted. We're finished. His eyes landed on the evidence container. Then, on the emergency shredder beside the workstation, he made a decision. I'm destroying it. Harold stepped in front of him. You touch federal evidence. I don't care. Thomas shoved Harold aside and reached for the sealed evidence case. The moment his fingers touched it, the laboratory door burst open. Federal agents. Victor Hayes entered first with 4 tactical agents behind him. Step away from the evidence! Thomas froze. Harold slowly raised both hands. Victor looked directly at the evidence container. No one moves. Thomas glanced toward the emergency exit. Victor noticed. Don't. For a split second, Thomas considered running. Instead, he lunged toward the laptop. Victor reacted instantly. 2 agents restrained Thomas before he could reach the table. The evidence container never moved. Victor calmly nodded toward Carlos Ramirez. Secure everything. Within seconds, every hard drive, document, and workstation inside the laboratory had been photographed and sealed. Harold closed his eyes. It was over. Downstairs, Derek tried to regain control. This is still my investigation. Ethan looked at him. No. It became ours the moment federal evidence was compromised. Derek's jaw tightened. You have no proof. Melissa Grant stepped forward carrying a tablet. Actually, she touched the screen. The large monitor behind the media podium suddenly displayed surveillance footage from server room C. Every reporter stared. The mysterious maintenance worker entered the secured federal facility. Then came the close-up of the identification badge. Baltimore Police Technical Support. Gasps echoed across the lobby. Derek's expression hardened. That proves nothing. Lisa Chen appeared beside Melissa. It proves someone from your department entered a secured federal server room without authorization. Another video followed. Chain of custody records. Metadata comparisons. Edited timestamps. Duplicated officer signatures. Emily Ross whispered to herself, May God. Every piece fit together. Every inconsistency she had discovered. Every question Derek had avoided. The truth was unfolding in real time. Inside the holding area, Sergeant Linda Harper unlocked Naomi's cell. Naomi looked up calmly. Is it time? Linda blinked. You knew. I hoped. Linda hesitated before quietly removing the handcuffs from Naomi's wrists. I'm sorry. Naomi gently rubbed the deep marks left by the steel. You weren't the one who put them there. Linda lowered her eyes. No, but I helped keep you here. Naomi placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Then, help make sure the truth leaves this building. Linda nodded. I will. Together they walked toward the hallway. As Naomi entered the main corridor, Conversations stopped. Officers stared silently. Some lowered their heads. Others stepped aside without being asked. No one spoke. The atmosphere had completely changed. Moments earlier, she had been treated like the department's most dangerous prisoner. Now, no one seemed certain who she really was. Back in the lobby, Ethan Brooks turned toward Naomi as she entered. For the first time since the arrest, their eyes met. Neither spoke. The entire room watched. Reporters held their breath. Television cameras zoomed in. Even Derek instinctively turned toward Naomi. He expected Ethan to question her, perhaps even criticize her. Instead, Ethan stood perfectly straight. He slowly removed his FBI cap. Every federal agent behind him did exactly the same. One synchronized motion. The lobby became completely silent. Then Ethan raised his right hand. Every FBI agent followed. Dozens of hands rose together in a formal salute. Not one word was spoken. Naomi returned the salute with quiet dignity. Reporters looked at one another in stunned disbelief. Camera shutters exploded. No one understood what they were witnessing. Derek stared in complete confusion. "What?" His voice cracked. "What is this?" Ethan finally lowered his hand. He turned slowly toward Derek. "You've spent the last 48 hours treating Dr. Naomi Carter like a suspect." A long pause settled over the room. Then Ethan spoke words that instantly changed everything. "You never bothered to ask who she was." Every camera light burned brighter. Every microphone leaned closer. Every person inside headquarters waited for the answer. "You never bothered to ask who she was." Special Agent Ethan Brooks let the words hang in the air. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the flashing cameras seemed quieter. Lieutenant Derek Holloway forced a laugh that sounded more nervous than confident. "Who she is doesn't change the evidence." Ethan turned slowly toward Melissa Grant. "It does." Melissa handed him a dark blue leather credential wallet. Ethan opened it carefully before holding it toward the cameras. "This is the credential Lieutenant Holloway threw onto the pavement 48 hours ago." The photographers zoomed in. The federal seal shimmered beneath the lobby lights. Ethan read aloud. "Dr. Naomi Carter." He turned another page. "Lead Technical Advisor." Another page. "Federal Interagency, Cyber Integrity Task Force." Then he closed the credential wallet with a quiet snap. "For the last 22 months, Dr. Carter has led the digital forensic operation responsible for uncovering a multi-state corruption network involving fraudulent federal contracts, evidence tampering, and public officials." The lobby erupted. Reporters shouted over one another. "What? She led the investigation? She's federal?" Emily Ross stood frozen, notebook hanging at her side. Every unanswered question from the past 2 days suddenly made sense. Naomi had never defended herself. She had never argued. She had never panicked. She couldn't. The operation had depended on her silence. Derek's face lost all color. "That's impossible." "No," Ethan answered. "What's impossible is believing you arrested a federal task force advisor without verifying her identity." Derek pointed toward Naomi. She never identified herself. Naomi finally spoke. "I identified myself 3 separate times." She looked directly at him. "You never listened." The words struck harder than any accusation. Officer Kevin Morris lowered his head. He remembered Naomi calmly saying, "Lieutenant, you're making a mistake that can't be undone." She had warned them. From the very beginning, Melissa connected another device to the large monitor. This operation has now been declassified. A new series of documents appeared. Financial transfers, encrypted communications, property records, photographs. Every file connected Thomas Ellison's construction company to millions of dollars in fraudulent cybersecurity contracts. Then another slide appeared, a chart showing unauthorized access to federal servers. Every illegal login traced back to one location. Baltimore Police Technical Support. Gasps echoed throughout the room. Melissa continued. "The cloned data recovered from server room C exactly matches the files later manipulated inside Baltimore Police Headquarters." Lisa Chen stepped forward. "We also recovered deleted metadata proving chain of custody records were edited before Dr. Carter's arrest." Another screen appeared. Side-by-side timestamps, 3:41 p.m. 4:27 p.m. Every reporter immediately understood. The paperwork had existed before the arrest itself. Emily whispered, "They built the case first, and looked for evidence afterward." Derek suddenly raised his voice. "This proves nothing about me." Ethan calmly nodded. "You're right." Then he looked toward Carlos Ramirez. "Carlos." Carlos opened a thick evidence binder. "We executed federal warrants this morning." He removed several printed financial records. "These are bank transfers totaling $482,000. He laid them on the podium. Received over the last 14 months. Another page. Destination account. He looked directly at Derek. Registered to Holloway Family Consulting, LLC. Every camera immediately turned toward Derek. His breathing became uneven. That's my wife's business. Carlos nodded. It is. And every payment originated from companies controlled by Thomas Ellison. Thomas, still handcuffed beside 2 FBI agents, closed his eyes. The room understood. The money had connected everything. Harold Pierce slowly raised his hand. I want to make a statement. Victor Hayes looked at Ethan. Ethan nodded once. Harold stepped forward. My name is Harold Pierce. His voice trembled. I was hired to erase forensic traces inside the police evidence system. Complete silence filled the lobby. I never expected anyone innocent to be arrested. He looked toward Naomi. When I realized who Dr. Carter actually was, he swallowed. I tried to convince Lieutenant Holloway to contact the FBI. Every reporter began writing furiously. Harold continued. He refused. Derek shouted, "He's lying!" Harold looked back at him. No, you told me. He repeated Derek's exact words. We've already arrested her. If the FBI wants something, they can ask. Kevin Morris slowly closed his eyes. He had heard those words. Exactly those words. Officer Daniel Price stepped forward next. I have something too. He removed the encrypted flash drive from inside his jacket. I copied the original evidence logs before they were altered again. Melissa accepted the drive. Lisa immediately connected it to the forensic workstation. Within seconds, the untouched records appeared on the screen. Every edit, every deletion, every fabricated signature, every unauthorized access, nothing remained hidden anymore. Daniel looked toward the reporters. I became a police officer because I believed the badge represented truth. His voice remained steady. It doesn't. He glanced toward Naomi. The people wearing it do. The room fell silent again. Ethan finally turned toward Naomi. Dr. Carter, you've protected this investigation for 22 months. You allowed your own reputation to be destroyed rather than compromise federal arrests. You never broke operational security. You never revealed classified information. You fulfilled your oath. Naomi answered quietly. I was just doing my job. Melissa smiled softly. You always say that. Ethan reached into his jacket and removed a folded federal document. The Attorney General has authorized full public disclosure. He looked directly into every camera. As of this moment, the Federal Interagency Cyber Integrity Task Force has completed Operation Integrity Shield. He paused. 73 federal search warrants, 26 arrests, 4 states, $192 million in fraudulent contracts recovered. And none of it, he turned toward Naomi, would have been possible without Dr. Naomi Carter. The reporters broke into spontaneous applause. Even several local officers quietly joined them. Emily Ross lowered her camera. This was no longer simply the story of a wrongful arrest. It was the story of a woman who had sacrificed her own name to protect justice. Only Derek remained motionless. The confidence that had defined him for years was gone. He looked around the lobby. His officers no longer stood behind him. The reporters no longer believed him. The evidence no longer protected him. He was completely alone. Carlos Ramirez stepped forward holding a pair of federal handcuffs. Lieutenant Derek Holloway. He spoke clearly enough for every microphone to capture each word. You are under arrest for obstruction of a federal investigation, destruction of evidence, conspiracy to violate civil rights, abuse of official authority, and multiple counts of evidence tampering. For a brief moment, Derek looked toward Naomi, perhaps expecting anger. Or satisfaction. She showed neither. Only quiet disappointment. As Carlos secured the handcuffs around Derek's wrists, Ethan looked toward the gathered agents. It's over, Naomi slowly exhaled. After nearly 2 years of silence, the truth finally belonged to everyone. The metallic click of the handcuffs echoed through the lobby. 48 hours earlier, that same sound had humiliated Dr. Naomi Carter before television cameras across America. Now it surrounded Lieutenant Derek Holloway instead. The silence inside Baltimore Police Headquarters felt heavier than any applause could have. Carlos Ramirez calmly escorted Derek toward the front entrance. Every television camera followed. The lieutenant who had proudly staged a public arrest now walked past the same reporters with his head lowered, his wrists secured behind his back. No one rushed to ask for his comments. No one defended him. The headlines had already begun changing. Emily Ross looked down at her laptop as alerts flooded the newsroom. Breaking. FBI clears. Wrongfully arrested federal advisor. Evidence fabricated inside Baltimore Police Headquarters. Federal corruption investigation ends with multiple arrests. She quietly deleted the draft story she had prepared the night before. Instead, She opened a blank document and typed a new headline. The woman who chose silence so justice could speak. She knew that headline would outlive every sensational rumor printed about Naomi only hours earlier. Outside the headquarters, dozens of residents had gathered behind police barricades. Many recognized Naomi immediately. Some lowered their phones in embarrassment. Others quietly looked away. An elderly veteran slowly removed his cap as Naomi walked outside. "I owe you an apology, ma'am." Naomi stopped. "You don't know me." "I thought I did." His voice cracked slightly. "I believed what I saw on television." Naomi smiled gently. "So did a lot of people. I'm sorry." She extended her hand. "The truth matters more than being right." The old veteran shook her hand with both of his. Nearby, several people who had mocked Naomi online the previous day watched silently. No speech could have embarrassed them more than witnessing the dignity with which she accepted an apology she never demanded. Inside the Federal Command vehicle, Ethan Brooks reviewed the final operational report. Melissa Grant entered carrying another folder. Operation Integrity Shield is officially closed. Ethan signed the final page. Casualties? Melissa smiled faintly. None. Recovered assets? $192 million. Arrests? 29 after this afternoon. Ethan leaned back. And Dr. Carter? Melissa looked through the window toward Naomi, speaking quietly with reporters. She's already asking when she can return to work. Ethan laughed. Of course she is. Over the next several weeks, the consequences spread far beyond Baltimore. Thomas Ellison pleaded guilty to multiple federal fraud charges. Rebecca Sloan accepted a cooperation agreement, providing investigators with years of hidden financial records. Michael Foster resigned from public office before formal impeachment proceedings began. Harold Pierce entered witness protection after agreeing to testify against the remaining members of the conspiracy. More arrests followed in neighboring states. What had begun as the public humiliation of one innocent woman ultimately dismantled an entire criminal network that had operated in the shadows for years. The Baltimore Police Department faced intense public scrutiny. Captain Robert Fields held a press conference unlike any the city had seen. "We failed Dr. Naomi Carter." He didn't blame paperwork. He didn't blame communication failures. He accepted responsibility. "We allowed ambition to replace procedure. We allowed assumptions to replace evidence, and we allowed an innocent woman to wear handcuffs that should never have touched her wrists." Several officers standing behind him quietly lowered their heads. Among them stood Officer Daniel Price. His decision to preserve the original evidence had become one of the investigation's turning points. A week later, he received a letter from the FBI. Inside was a simple note. "Integrity is what you do when telling the truth costs you something. Thank you." Daniel folded the letter carefully and placed it inside the same notebook where he had hidden the flash drive. He knew he would keep both for the rest of his life. Sergeant Linda Harper chose a different path. She volunteered to lead a new department-wide training program focused on evidence, integrity, constitutional policing, and procedural accountability. At the first session, she held up a pair of handcuffs. "These don't create justice." She looked around the room. "The people using them do." No one in the classroom forgot those words. 3 months later, Baltimore City Hall hosted a public ceremony honoring federal and local officials who had helped restore public trust. Mayor Benjamin Cole stepped onto the stage. "Today isn't about celebrating an investigation. It's about correcting a failure." He invited Naomi Carter forward. The audience rose in a standing ovation before she reached the podium. For nearly a full minute, no one sat down. The applause wasn't loud because people were excited. It was loud because they felt ashamed of how quickly they had judged her. The mayor presented Naomi with the city's Medal of Civic Integrity. She accepted it with the same quiet humility she had shown throughout the investigation. When the applause finally faded, she stepped toward the microphone. "I appreciate this honor." She paused. "But I hope one day we won't need ceremonies like this." The room became silent. "I hope we become a society that asks questions before making accusations. I hope we remember that a uniform deserves respect." She glanced briefly toward several police officers seated in the front row. "But so does every citizen standing in front of it." Another pause. "And I hope we never confuse confidence with truth." No dramatic speech followed. No anger. No revenge. Only wisdom earned through pain. Later that evening, Naomi returned home. The brick townhouse looked exactly as it had before the arrest. Her mother, Gloria Carter, opened the front door before Naomi reached the steps. Without saying a word, she wrapped both arms around her daughter. Neither woman spoke for several moments. Some victories needed no explanation. Inside the living room, Marcus Carter pointed toward the television. The evening news replayed the moment the FBI agents had saluted Naomi. Marcus smiled. They'll probably show that forever. Naomi watched quietly. Then she looked at the faint marks that still remained around her wrists. The bruises would disappear. The lesson would not. She turned off the television. Come on. Gloria smiled. Where are we going? Naomi picked up her car keys. You've been asking me to take a vacation. Her mother laughed. So you're finally keeping your promise? Naomi opened the front door. I think we've earned one. Together, they stepped into the cool evening air, not as victims, not as heroes, but as people who had discovered that truth sometimes walks the longest road before finally reaching the light. The strongest people are not always the loudest. They are often the ones who quietly stand by the truth when everything seems against them. Never judge someone's worth by a single moment or a single headline. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from. And subscribe for more stories that remind us why integrity always matters.